My ex told me I was too broke to be loved. Now she's DMing me while I'm on a yacht she'll never step on. I'm a 26-year-old guy, and I used to believe love could survive anything: hardship, stress, even ambition. I met Sarah during our sophomore year in college. She was beautiful, sharp, and had this magnetic energy that made everyone around her feel small but inspired. I fell for her confidence, her drive, the way she spoke about her future like it was already written. In the beginning, we were that couple everyone admired. We studied together, dreamed together, and promised that one day we'd build something extraordinary. I worked part-time jobs, bartending, tutoring, whatever I could find to make ends meet, while she focused on internships that aligned with her goals. I didn't mind. I thought we were a team. But as time went on, the dynamic shifted. Sarah started making subtle comments, little jabs, that didn't sound like jokes anymore. "You're really okay doing that kind of work." Or, "I just don't want to live paycheck to paycheck forever." At first, I brushed it off. I thought it was her way of motivating me. But slowly, I realized it wasn't encouragement, it was judgment. By the time we graduated, she was already chasing bigger opportunities, networking, dressing like a CEO, talking about people she met who understood success. I noticed how her tone changed when she spoke to me about my job. She used to be proud that I worked hard. Now she called it settling. I kept telling myself it was just a phase, that once things stabilized, she'd see how dedicated I was. But deep down, something was breaking. The woman I thought I was building a life with wasn't looking at me as her partner anymore. She was comparing me to a checklist she hadn't finished writing yet. I didn't realize it then, but those subtle comments were the first cracks in what I thought was forever. It started small, little differences in how we spent our evenings. The way conversations drifted toward things that made me feel smaller with every word. Sarah began surrounding herself with a new crowd, ambitious people from her firm, all sharp suits and sharper tongues. Whenever I joined her at events, I felt like an outsider. The jokes were about investments, promotions, and travel plans. And whenever someone asked me what I did, Sarah would chime in first. "He's figuring out his next move." That hurt more than I admitted. I had a stable job, decent pay, and dreams of my own, but she made it sound like I was some lost kid clinging to her success. I tried talking to her about it once. She laughed it off, said I was too sensitive, and that she just wanted me to have a vision. From then on, I noticed how she began changing, not just her tone, but her entire energy. She started coming home late, claiming she was grinding for the future. She wore more makeup, spent more time on her phone, and less time looking me in the eye. When we did talk, it was about her goals, her boss, her colleagues, who just got it. I worked harder, thinking if I could just earn more, do more, she'd see me differently. But instead of gratitude, she seemed irritated. "You're just doing this to prove something?" she snapped once. When I told her about a promotion I'd been chasing, that night I remember lying awake beside her, realizing how far we'd drifted. I wasn't her partner anymore, was her project that failed to impress. The warmth that once filled our home had been replaced by silence, heavy and cold. I didn't know it then, but the woman lying next to me was already halfway out the door. One evening, everything changed. It was a Friday night, the kind of night we used to spend watching movies and ordering takeout. But lately, Sarah had been too busy for that. When she finally walked in, hours past midnight, I could smell expensive perfume that wasn't hers. Her excuse came fast. "Just a work dinner, babe. You know how these things go." But something about the way she avoided my eyes told me there was more to the story. I tried to trust her. I really did. But over the next few weeks, the signs multiplied. She started dressing differently, classier, bolder. Her phone was always flipped face down, notifications muted, and when I asked simple questions like, "How was your day?" she'd sigh like I was interrogating her. One night, I overheard her whispering on the phone in the living room. Her voice was low, soft in a way I hadn't heard in months. I couldn't make out the words, but I didn't need to. The tone said everything. When she saw me standing there, she froze, then forced a smile. "It's just a friend," she said. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed every conversation, every red flag I'd ignored. The pieces began fitting together: her growing disdain for my job, her fascination with her coworkers, her sudden need for space. I started realizing that her ambitions weren't just professional, they were personal. She wanted to climb higher, even if it meant stepping over me to get there. A few days later, I checked her social media. She had posted a picture from a work trip, but standing next to her, arm casually around her shoulder, was a man I'd never met. The caption read, "Chasing dreams with the best team." That was the moment the truth hit me. I wasn't part of her dreams anymore. I was just the past she was outgrowing. I tried to tell myself that picture meant nothing, that maybe it was innocent, that maybe I was overreacting. But deep down, I already knew. Still, I needed to hear it from her. So one night, when she came home late again, I finally asked, "Who's Daniel?" I said quietly, watching her freeze mid-step. For a split second, her face went pale before she forced a smirk. "He's just a colleague. Don't be paranoid." But my gut told me otherwise. "Then why are you out with him every night? Why are you lying about where you are?" I pushed, my voice trembling not with anger, but with something worse, fear. Fear of hearing what I already knew. She sighed dramatically, like she was the victim in all this. "You know what your problem is? You're insecure. You've been holding me back. I'm trying to build something of myself, and all you do is question me." That hit me like a slap. Holding her back? I'd spent years supporting her, paying bills, cheering her on, sacrificing sleep to make sure we stayed afloat. I wasn't holding her back. I was the foundation she was standing on while she reached for more. I told her that, but she just rolled her eyes. "You'll never understand what it's like to want more." Something inside me broke, then not out of anger, but acceptance. I saw it in her eyes. The woman who once held my hand through late-night study sessions, who used to whisper dreams into the darkness, was gone. In her place stood someone who saw me as a checkpoint she'd already passed. That night, we didn't fight. We didn't even shout. She went to bed, and I sat on the couch, staring into nothing. It was the quietest breakup I'd ever experienced because it didn't need words. The silence said everything. The following weeks were pure emotional limbo. Sarah and I still lived under the same roof, but the air between us was thick with unspoken resentment. We'd pass each other in the hallway like strangers, our conversations reduced to logistics, rent, groceries, bills. Everything that once made our home feel alive was gone. I kept trying to hold on, hoping there was still something worth saving. I'd cook her favorite meals, ask if she wanted to watch our old shows, even suggest taking a short trip, just the two of us. Every time, she'd brush me off. "I'm busy, I'm tired," or the one that cut the deepest, "I just don't feel like pretending anymore." Pretending. That word stuck with me like a knife in the chest. It meant everything I'd been doing, every compromise, every late-night talk, every apology for things I didn't do, had been for nothing. Then one night, I came home early from work. Her shoes were by the door. Music was playing softly from the bedroom. For a second, I thought maybe, just maybe, she was making an effort. But when I opened the door, I froze. She wasn't alone. Daniel was sitting on the edge of our bed, his shirt halfway unbuttoned. Sarah jumped up, her face flashing from shock to defiance in seconds. "You weren't supposed to be home," was all she said. I stood there, numb. No yelling, no dramatic scene, just the sound of my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I looked at her, really looked, and realized I didn't even recognize her anymore. Without a word, I turned around, grabbed my keys, and walked out. I drove aimlessly for hours, replaying every sacrifice, every moment. I believed we were building something real. It hit me, then she hadn't changed overnight. I just refused to see who she'd been becoming all along. That night, I decided it was over for real this time, when I finally walked away from that apartment. It felt like stepping out of a fog I didn't realize I'd been living in. The silence of my car ride home was almost peaceful until the reality hit me. I had no plan, no closure, and no idea who I was without her. The next few days were a blur. I stayed at a friend's place, barely eating or sleeping. I kept replaying everything in my mind, the first date, the laughter, the whispered promises. It all felt fake now, like a movie I'd been cast in without realizing the ending was already written. Sarah tried calling once. I didn't answer. Then came the texts. "We need to talk. It's not what you think. Please don't make this ugly." That last one made me laugh bitterly. Don't make this ugly. She'd burned our entire life down, and somehow I was the one expected to stay calm. Eventually, I packed what little I owned from our apartment while she was at work. No confrontation, no goodbye, just quiet closure. As I left, I found an old photo of US college days, bright smiles, full of stupid hope. For a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered the look on her face when she said, "You'll never understand what it's like to want more." In the months that followed, I rebuilt piece by piece. I moved into a smaller apartment, started saving aggressively, focused on work. Slowly, I realized something. Sarah's betrayal, as painful as it was, had stripped me down to the truth. I had been living for someone else's approval, molding myself into her version of worthy. One night, sitting alone in my quiet kitchen, I finally felt at peace. Not happiness, not yet, but peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't chasing anyone's expectations. I was just me. And that, I realized, was the real freedom she could never understand. It's strange how life starts to rebuild itself quietly, without any grand moment or revelation. At first I thought healing meant waking up one day and suddenly feeling fine, but it didn't work like that. Healing came in fragments, cooking my own breakfast without feeling hollow, laughing at a stupid meme, or realizing a whole day had passed without thinking of her. I threw myself into work, not as an escape, but as a way to prove to myself that I could stand on my own. I started saying yes to new opportunities, projects I'd once turned down because Sarah said they were beneath me. Turns out, they weren't. They taught me skills, discipline, and a sense of confidence I hadn't felt in years. People noticed the change. Friends who'd stopped seeing me because I was too busy with her started coming back around. I reconnected with old classmates, hit the gym again, and finally started sleeping properly. Slowly, the version of me that had vanished in that relationship began resurfacing, stronger, calmer, and more grounded still. There were nights that hit hard. Nights where I'd catch myself wondering if she ever thought about me, if she regretted what she'd done. But even when those thoughts crept in, I didn't spiral anymore. I'd learned that closure doesn't come from the person who hurt you, it comes from accepting that you deserved better all along. One afternoon, while walking home from work, I passed by a cafe where Sarah and I used to spend hours studying in college. The same table by the window was empty. I stopped, smiled to myself, and kept walking. That small, quiet act felt like reclaiming something I didn't know I'd lost. I wasn't just moving on, I was becoming the person she said I couldn't be. And that realization felt better than any revenge ever could. About a year later, life had settled into something I could finally call mine. I had a promotion, a decent apartment, and a peace I didn't think I'd ever find again. Then, one afternoon, while grabbing coffee before work, I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Hey, I almost didn't recognize you." It was Sarah. For a moment, it felt like time folded in on itself. She looked different still, polished, still beautiful, but tired in a way I couldn't quite describe. Her confidence had dulled, replaced with something that felt more like hesitation. We exchanged small talk. She asked about my job, my apartment, my life. I told her things were good, simple, honest, good. Then she smiled sadly and said, "I'm happy for you. You look happier." It was such a simple statement, but it carried years of weight. There was a flicker of regret in her eyes, the kind that comes when someone realizes they walked away from stability, chasing illusions of success. She mentioned Daniel briefly, how things didn't work out. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. When she asked if I wanted to catch up sometime, I didn't hesitate long. I smiled and said, "I don't think that's a good idea, Sarah, but I wish you well." Her face fell just slightly, and for once, I didn't feel anger or pride, just closure. As I walked out of that cafe, I realized something profound. The man she left couldn't have handled that moment with grace. But the man I had become, the one rebuilt from all that pain, could, for years. I thought I needed revenge or an apology to move on. But standing there, calm and unshaken, I realized I'd already won. Not because she lost, but because I found myself again. And for the first time, I genuinely meant it when I said goodbye. That brief encounter with Sarah stayed with me for days, not because I missed her, but because it finally showed me how much I'd changed. A year ago, her voice could have broken me. Now, it barely echoed. I realized the power had quietly shifted. For so long, she'd held control over my emotions, my confidence, even how I saw myself. But now, standing on my own, I saw her for what she truly was. A chapter, not my story. A few weeks later, I attended a networking event through work. The kind of event Sarah would have thrived at ambitious people. Sharp talk, all about climbing ladders. I walked in confidently, not to prove anything, but to connect, learn, grow. To my surprise, I found myself being approached by people who wanted my input, my advice. Somewhere along the way, I'd become the kind of person she used to idolize in. I didn't even need to flaunt it that night. I thought about how she once said, "You'll never understand what it's like to want more." Funny thing was, she was right, but not in the way she meant. I did want more. Not money, not status, more peace, more honesty, more meaning. And that's exactly what I'd found. Meanwhile, Sarah's name occasionally popped up through mutual friends. The glamorous image she used to project had cracked. Daniel had left her, and her new job hadn't lasted. There was a quiet irony in it all. She'd chased a dream of more and ended up with less than she started with. But I didn't feel vindicated. Instead, I felt grateful. Grateful that her betrayal had forced me to grow, to rebuild, to redefine what success meant. She once saw me as a man who wasn't enough. Now, I was exactly the kind of man she'd never deserve, and that truth, simple and quiet, was worth every scar she left behind. Life has a strange way of rewarding those who keep walking, even when they can't see what's ahead. Months after that final encounter with Sarah, I met someone new, Emma. She wasn't flashy. She didn't talk about success in numbers or titles. She was grounded, genuine, and had this calm energy that felt like home. We met at a friend's get-together. And what struck me first was how easy everything felt. There were no games, no silent comparisons. For the first time, I could just be myself without feeling like I had to prove my worth. She laughed at my stupid jokes, asked questions that showed she listened. And when I told her about my past, she didn't flinch. She simply said, "You deserved better." With Emma, I learned that love doesn't have to feel like walking on eggshells. It can be quiet, steady, and still powerful. We built something simple, but solid late-night talks, shared meals, small adventures. She reminded me what partnership was supposed to feel like. Two people growing together, not one pulling the other down to climb higher. Sometimes, I'd catch myself reflecting on how far I'd come. The man who once felt like a failure because he wasn't ambitious enough was now thriving in career, in confidence, in peace. I no longer needed validation to feel valuable. One evening, as Emma and I watched the sunset from my apartment balcony, she said softly, "You seem like someone who's been through a storm." I smiled. "Yeah," I said, "but I think I finally found the calm after it." That's when I realized Sarah's betrayal wasn't the end of my story. It was the catalyst that forced me to rediscover myself. And as the sky faded into gold, I knew for certain I'd stopped chasing someone else's version of more. I'd finally found mine looking back now. I can't help but feel a strange sense of gratitude for everything that happened. If Sarah hadn't broken me, I might have never rebuilt myself. If she hadn't walked away, I might have never learned how to stand alone. Pain, as it turns out, can be the most honest teacher. There were times during the breakup when I thought I'd lost everything: love, direction, even self. But with distance, I saw the truth. I hadn't lost anything that was truly mine. What I lost was the illusion that love meant sacrifice without boundaries. I learned that you can give your heart to someone, but if you lose yourself in the process, it's not love, it's surrender. When I think of Sarah now, I don't feel bitterness. She was chasing what she thought she needed, and maybe she had to go through her own version of loss to understand what really matters. I hope she finds that peace one day, the way I eventually did. I used to replay her words, "You'll never understand what it's like to want more," like a curse. But now, they feel different. I do understand wanting more. I just learned to want the right kind of more. More honesty, more peace. More authenticity. Emma often tells me I have an old soul that I think too deeply about things most people would just move past. Maybe she's right. But it's that reflection that keeps me grounded. It reminds me that every scar has a story, and every loss has a lesson. Sometimes on quiet nights. I look out the window and think about that younger version of Mitha. One who thought love was enough to fix everything. I wish I could tell him that it isn't, but I'd also tell him this. One day you'll be grateful it all fell apart. Because from those broken pieces, you'll build something stronger than you ever imagined. Dash yourself. It's been over 2 years since everything ended. And sometimes, I still catch myself wondering how different my life might have been if things had gone the way I planned. But then I look around the quiet apartment filled with warmth, the steady rhythm of my days, the calmness in my heart, and I know I wouldn't change a thing. Sarah's betrayal used to define me. For a long time, I was the guy who got cheated on, the guy who wasn't enough. But now, when I think about that version of myself, I see someone who refused to stay broken. Someone who took the worst pain he'd ever felt and turned it into purpose. The irony is that everything she said I lacked ambition, confidence, stability I found after she left. Only I found it for myself, not for anyone else's approval. I stopped chasing the image of what love was supposed to look like and started living what it actually felt like: peaceful, honest, real. Emma and I are still together. It's not a storybook. Romance sits better. It's real. We argue, we laugh, we plan, we forgive. And every day I wake up knowing that I'm loved for who I am, not for what I can offer. Sometimes people ask me if I'd ever take Sarah back if she showed up again, truly changed. The answer is simple. No, not out of anger, but out of growth. Because the man I am now doesn't need validation from the woman who broke him to prove he's healed. If there's one thing life taught me through all of this, it's that heartbreak isn't the end, it's the awakening. You don't just recover, you evolve. And as I look toward the future with peace in my chest and strength in my silence, I realize something beautiful. Losing her was never the tragedy. It was the beginning of becoming me.